Welcome to G42 On Air. As AI and advanced technologies scale at lightning speed, this podcast series brings us face to face with the change makers shaping our future. So take your front row seat with me, Amandeep, as we ask how these powerful new technologies are created, how they're transforming our world, and what's coming next. In today's episode, we focus on safeguarding data privacy in an AI-driven world, and I'm delighted that joining me here in the studio to help understand this, I have His Excellency Mohamed Aljneibi, Head of Cybersecurity at the Abu Dhabi Department of Government Enablement, and Hadi Anwar, Acting CEO of CPX, one of the national cybersecurity providers here in the UAE. Gentlemen, welcome. Now, these are really big, broad, technical terms that we're going to be diving into today. So let's take a broad approach, an aerial view, if I may ask. Your Excellency, when we speak about cybersecurity, what should we be thinking about at the forefront of our minds?
Well, thank you for the introduction, Amandeep, and you can just call me Mohamed. It's much easier that way. So I think the three top things maybe that just comes out of my head, having worked in cyber, is it probably comes down to maybe one or two or three of these, or all of them together, is awareness. A lot of people look at cybersecurity and are inundated with the information of the cases, the situations that strikes a bit of fear on them. So they don't know what to expect because it's taking in so different shapes. The second would be our understanding of how we manage our digital footprint. Today, the world is super interconnected, and people have a lot of their own digital lives online. And not understanding the implications of your digital footprint can also lead into potential issues in cyber. And then the final thing was probably more on, if I say specifically with relations to the government, I would say it has to revolve around information sharing. I think a lot of entities, a lot of businesses have problems that come by, and then what really would help safeguard everyone else is to know the sorts of problems that happen. So those are kind of like around those three areas that you tend to see cyber really go around, and obviously there's probably others, but those are the ones that come to my mind initially.
Well, that certainly gives us a really good, excellent starting point. So we're talking about awareness, managing digital footprints, and information sharing. Now, Hadi, from your perspective, what do you think we should have at the forefront of our mind?
I think we need to look at how technology changes our daily lifestyles and how much dependent are we today. If you look at any individual, we've got 4 gadgets on us on an average, and securing the information on those gadgets is where we come in to ensure that we give you the confidence that the data is protected, right? So it's individually driven, then it's organizational and enterprise driven, and then there's a national angle to it as well. So we need to ensure that individually in our homes, in our families, our kids, our children, all that data is extremely sensitive, extremely private, and we need to ensure that we have the right controls around that to protect that information.
I think what's really excellent with both of the answers that you provide there, that you've made something which can seem quite theoretical and disconnected, actually really applicable to our everyday lives. Correct. You started there with that personal application. Absolutely. And you broadened it out to business and to government, which really brings me nicely on to asking about this very special partnership here. Gentlemen, you know each other, and this collaboration, it represents, Mohamed, that private and government entity collaboration. Why is that so important?
So I think the relationship has always been at the bedrock of this strategy. Initially, when we had worked on the national cybersecurity strategy back in 2014, I remember, the intention was to activate the different spheres of influence, let's say, within cyber. And the vast majority of that tends to reside within the private sector. So for governments in particular taking a stance with regards to cyber resiliency, it only makes sense that they would look for the strategic partnerships, the strategic integrators, system integrators, national integrators in some cases, to actually be a part of that journey with them. And that's pretty much where it really revolves around.
I really love that expression that you use there, cyber resiliency. It was a positive spin to something which otherwise could be problematic. Now, CPX, you address these problems.
So I would probably just expand on what Mohamed just mentioned about the strategy. So we have a regulator here called Cybersecurity Council. They have 5 pillars in their strategy. Pillar number 3 is called private-public partnerships, which clearly tells us how closely the government and the private sector have to engage, have to work together for the betterment of the country, for our nation.
So that's
And
here in the UAE.
Correct.
And how new is something like that to the region?
well, I mean, the public-private partnerships have been there for multi-years.
Sure.
And the reason why we feel that the private sector can play a role is because we focus and specialize in securing the national digital assets of the country. And this is where CPX plugs itself in to ensure that we are focusing on protecting the crown jewels of the nation. And this is where me and Mohamed, we partner very well together, because he manages the entire government sector, and then I come in and support him in securing those assets which are under his umbrella.
So that's a seamless link then to bring in Mohamed and describe what are some of the issues that you really want to tackle when it comes to cybersecurity threats from a government perspective.
So I think my colleague Hadi has said it best. We do try to protect and safeguard the most important assets for the government, and that partnership is very important, not just only on the safeguarding part, but also in capabilities and skill sets. It's no secret that cybersecurity today is a very scarce resource now globally. It's a very sought-out resource, and there's a lot of challenges for governments to actually have the ability to attract top talent to come in and actually do that kind of work. So it would make sense for us to work with people like Hadi to actually be in a strategic position to actually support our engagement in that field by being the provider of choice or the strategic partner to be able to kind of move along and help us in that realm.
Just on that point, the relationship which CPX has today with DGE is that we don't wait for them to come to us. We proactively go with solutions, and this is where the private sector plays an important role, because we have a focused R&D department looking at new tech to protect the government sector. And we go to them proactively and say, this is what we've seen, this is new for you, how about we apply that in the government sector? And that's the relationship between the government and private sector, which we need to bring together and foster and make it much more bigger.
I think that gives us a really top-level understanding of the importance of this collaboration and partnership. So now let's dig into some of those details. You said about providing those tech solutions. So what are we talking about exactly?
So talking about AI, talking about data, and talking about how we protect that data, I think some of the key concerns when we talk about AI is that it runs on data sets and large volumes of data set. Protecting those data sets from different threats, from different risks, is what we are talking about here. You must have seen the evolution of ChatGPT in the world and how it's taken all of our lives today. Protecting the data which underpins that is something where CPX comes in, and based on that we have put together a responsible AI framework which we are working closely on today as we speak, to ensure that everything around that AI capability which we build today is protected from a data perspective, the infrastructure perspective, and the people aspect as well.
So for our audience to understand this on an applicable level to them, you mentioned ChatGPT. This would be an example where the data they input into ChatGPT would be protected on their behalf.
Correct.
Is that
And I'm referring more to the entities who develop solutions like ChatGPT. When they start looking into developing, they have to consider data privacy by design, data security by design, data availability by design, responsible AI by design. And this way we play a role together in putting that framework together as well.
So responsible AI by design. And how does that address the issues that you face on a government level? Of course, with AI being adopted much more so in terms of the way that government departments work. Explain to me, Mohamed, how important the role of something like CPX is.
So this is a very good segue into one item that we've just recently launched in GITEX, was the GovGPT platform that we've worked on. And during that process, we had to rely on our strategic partners like CPX and the G42 umbrella to kind of like look at the platform and being able to give a ChatGPT-like experience to government employees to be able to create their own models and to be able to innovate for the solutions they want to solve internally, but also ensuring that that the data sets are treated in a way that it's actually managed by sovereign, by design, in that sense, and that's sort of the help and the engineering and the discussions that happen with responsibility and responsible AI deployments across the board. So I think that was one very good area of opportunity and work that we've actually done that's actually now showing its benefits today. So that's one good area to kind of segue into.
The world is still looking as to how to control AI today. There is the wide west over there on one side, and there is regulators on one side, right? And the regulators don't know how to control that today. And I think the truth is somewhere in the middle, between the Wild West and the regulators coming together and putting something together, because the AI models today, which are built, they can have their own biases as to how they respond to the questions being asked to that model. Data ownership, accountability of that data is not clear today. Who owns the data when we are putting inside that model? And there are adversarial attacks on these AI models, which again CPX comes in and protects that from firewalling them, from red team and pen testing them, ensuring that we have rigorous protection in place for these AI models.
I like the way you paint that. So you said there was a vacuum and CPX is coming in to kind of consume that vacuum and fulfill that need. The Wild West was described. Is that your understanding as well, Mohamed?
I think, the reality is AI, there's definitely maturity levels across the board. You know, governments to governments vary in how they approach AI and the question of AI. I think we're so fortunate as the UAE. I mean, it's been many years since we've already established a AI ministry in government. So that's one. And on top of that, we have relevant national strategic policies to push us to the direction. So I would argue CPX and everyone, our partners, operate in that environment to begin with. So there's great strategic direction there. Then there's the element of different, AI councils from the different emirates who are actually doing their own relevant agendas to their governments, respectively. That actually is even further enhancing the know-how and capability for entities or teams like CPX to actually address the questions in a much more meaningful and much more impactful way. Because again, it's very easy to be bogged down by AI. AI could mean millions of things, but to bring it back to the nuts and bolts, I think it really requires great visionary views, and for similar companies to come in and actually, participate in that landscape.
I think you paint it in a very compelling way there. You are right to say that we can get bogged down with a lot of the detail with AI, and AI can be misinterpreted and interpreted in so many ways.
Yeah.
The UAE, as you say, is visionary. I've spoken to the Minister of AI here for the UAE, and the forefront of the development, not just here in the region, but as a role model, actually, for the rest of the world. What's so special about what's happening here in the UAE?
Well, I think a lot of the discourse is happening in the UAE. I think the relative ease for us to be able to open up and have companies, private, public, semi-government entities to come together and actually talk about AI in innovative ways without really that much of regulatory capture, let's say, helps enable that discussion. And I think, their excellencies, obviously the leaders in this fold, are actually pushing that mantle, and we're, as government and obviously as private sectors, we're stepping up to the challenge and actually addressing it in our own ways.
And I think even on a personal level, this studio here is represented by that collaboration. We have
Absolutely.
Emirati representation, the international collaboration. I think this is key to the success
Absolutely.
of the UAE. Hadi, your perspective?
Absolutely. I think UAE has always been at the forefront of digital transformation, ahead of technology globally. And we were amongst the first country globally to have an AI ministry put in place and a minister in place, which shows you how important this is, and the leaders of the country are foreseeing what's upcoming for the global environments and AI challenges which we face today. So the importance was given from day one, and now we are maturing that with having the understanding, the education, the awareness within the country at all the multiple levels below that as well.
I'm going to talk about some of the challenges. You painted the opportunities that are being created here. But just before we delve into some of the challenges, opportunities, talent here in the region. The listeners are watching this. They're keen to work in cybersecurity. What are some of the core skills that they should be thinking about to bring to the table?
Would you like to take that, Hadi?
I don't mind.
You're in the sector, so.
I'll take that. I think cybersecurity and AI are two areas globally which are highly in demand and which will remain highly in demand. And you can quote me 5 years later from today as well, that this is going to be true. Why is that? Because technology is always going to be there and always being evolving. We've seen Web 3.0, blockchain coming in, now AI. And cybersecurity piggybacks into every single technology which comes out there. So the day technology stops, cybersecurity will stop, and that will never happen. So hence, cybersecurity is always going to be in demand. Now, talking about the skills, I believe we can look at multiple different areas, talking about the governance aspect, the policy writing, that is one area, the technical, getting your hands dirty, putting in the solutions in place and working for vendors, we can also do that. And also service providers like us who do the advisory, the consulting. There is a bit of a myth out there that AI is going to take over the jobs and everything. That's never going to happen because the skills required will change. Yes, 100%. But the jobs will always be there.
You make such an astute point there, Hadi, because I think by describing those skills, you're actually making the access into the industry is quite wide. Yes. Saying actually there can be a lot of people that can get involved in this. Hadi makes an excellent point about alleviating some of the misinformation about AI taking over people's jobs. Right. That must be something, Mohamed, in your senior position in the government, you must be aware of this pushback.
Absolutely. I think one of the key strategies within the Abu Dhabi government, our Gov AI view and stance is obviously pushing towards an AI native government. And what that entails is obviously we need to have an honest look and an assessment, which is ongoing, and we're doing that right now, of what are the workforce skill sets required for us to upskill the current workforce that we have right now working across the government. And the idea is that we should look at AI more as an augmentation to existing roles and existing skill sets that actually are still in requirement, they're still in demand. Some things will probably offset other things, but to me, it's not simply, and this applies as well to cyber, but when we talk about AI, I think that AI will come to a state where it's a given. You will have to have some sort of skill sets to take the use and leverage of AI to the next level. And that's sort of why we're doing, GovGPT and other platforms. So we're hopefully building this, this knowledge and skill base within the current workforce, and then obviously embedding it into the other streams where we actually get and attain talent from education sector, et cetera. So
I think that's a really important point you make, that when you're upskilling the workforce, it's about augmenting the existing roles and not replacing necessarily. Now that brings us nicely onto the idea as enterprises, as businesses and governments upscale their reliance on AI-driven solutions, and data therefore is at the heart of every AI operation. Yeah. Hadi, give us an insight in terms of the challenge there, upscaling, I should say, AI-driven solutions, the challenge of managing all that data from a privacy point of view, from the data analytics point of view, and how CPX comes in and solves those issues.
So in my humble view, I've seen that the world is supposed to be in a race against who reaches the endpoint first from an AI perspective, right? And when we are racing against each other, we forget that the control, the cybersecurity is so important, and it's mostly an afterthought. And I think that needs to be put forward and maybe thought about as a step one. And that's why we say data privacy by design has to be put in place when you're putting some solutions together. And data minimization is something extremely important when we talk about data privacy, because most of the times we end up using data which we don't even need. So let's focus on the data which we actually require to run our AI models. Then the strengthening of the accountability, the regulatory framework, which is again not mature enough today, something which regulators are working at a global scale. That's extremely important. Looking at the biasness of different AI models is something I spoke about. Again, something to look at very, very closely. And then comes the awareness of how to utilize that AI capability, which is built to benefit us. If we don't use that in a constructive manner, it can also be used in a destructive manner as well, which is where we have to be extremely careful about.
So you make a really powerful point there for data privacy by design to be offered in the offset of a creation of a business or a new government department, as opposed to an afterthought. And also how AI can actually be used as a force for good, but also is being used by the attackers themselves.
Correct. Yeah. Correct.
So if I can ask you, gentlemen, to kind of elaborate on that point.
So AI today, from where we've seen and where we've implemented our environments in the CPX, we use AI for threat prediction, for threat prevention, for looking at vast amounts of threats which are coming around our country, so we can pinpoint on which ones are the most important ones. So that's important. Then prediction of anomalies and behaviors of individuals within an organization, we focus on that. And if there's an anomaly, an alert comes up and says, you know what, Mohammed shouldn't be logging on a Saturday evening at 7 p.m. Why is he logging in there? And these are kind of alerts which AI-driven platforms can bring and assist us in protecting our environments, access control, encryption of data, making sure that all the sensitive crown jewels cannot be read or accessed by different individuals who don't have the right to do that. So all of these cybersecurity controls is where we utilize AI today within CPX.
I think that's super fascinating. And as AI actually gets integrated more into business processes, Mohamed, how can, from a government perspective, how can you ensure that companies ensure compliance and existing data protection laws are actually abided by?
So I think Hadi brought up a really great point about heuristic algorithms, which is basically the thing that actually detects these weird anomalies in an AI way. Getting people to be more aligned with the data security practices and the whatnot, all of that could be embedded into the models and the way they're being designed. I think securing the models to me right now is probably priority number one right now. Because again, we really are entering in a new area of development in terms of technology, and securing of the models themselves, the learning models that we deploy into our government use cases, is at the paramount of utmost importance. Because what we would like to avoid ideally is not bringing in, real world biases into these modules so that they don't actually serve the mandate that they're supposed to be serving. And hence, there's also an element, like Hadi probably alluded to earlier, where attackers are actually now realizing this and actually using it to their advantage. And that's sort of like now creating a role that we need to take 2 steps back and actually now start seeing how to actually address the topic. So that's where I would take it. I would think it needs to be more embedded into the model design. And like he said earlier, security by design is crucial. Keeping in mind as well the relevant, regulatory requirements that we're expected to keep as a government entity. So,
as you say, there's a new area of development, this type of technology, but there really is a very strong argument for embedding it, cybersecurity by design, from the very offset. If I may ask my penultimate question to you, gentlemen, when we talk about the current state of affairs, it's still a new area, as you say, projecting further ahead, 5 years, 10 years, what are some of the key opportunities and also challenges that you foresee? Hadi, if I may begin with you.
I think we need to look at AI as a commodity. AI becoming so easy to access in our general lives, just like we have water and electricity around us. It'll be that easy to utilize to help us live our lives in a much more effective manner. But there's also the other side, which is the destructive side. And that's why we've got, as CPX, a responsible AI framework, which we've put together, which has 3 main pillars: the model development and deployment, security and privacy considerations, and the third is the organizational drivers. So this looks at, number 1, how the model was developed; number 2, the security controls, the firewalling, the pen testing, continuous security around that; and the third aspect is around your organization, the AI strategy. How was that developed and how this everything comes together? So that's the responsible AI framework which we've put together.
I think there's a really interesting point, and you use that keyword there, AI as utility, which echoes Peng Xiao, the group CEO of G42. That's also the way that he conceives this idea as well. Mohammed?
Yeah, I think pretty much what Hadi had covered is pretty much what I would probably position in the coming few years. The only element maybe I would probably add to that is the role of quantum will come into the picture. I think.
And what do we mean by quantum?
So we're talking about cryptography, the mechanisms, the means, the algorithms that safeguard data being transferred all over the place by technology with, very high-end capable calculation methods that surpass the current set of technology. So I think what's going to happen is we're going to have to take AI, going to have to possibly bring an element of quantum into this and kind of like be a little bit of the head of the curve and actually safeguarding our environments. But again, this is something I would say 5, maybe less than 5, but maybe 5 to 10 year horizon. But everything that Hadi said specifically with AI, safe framework on how we do things is one of the reasons why we're in a very privileged position to talk about AI, work with AI, develop AI, and actually continue the discourse, even on the global sphere, because I think there's not a lot of places where this discussion is happening all at once.
I think you make some really important points there. The global conversation about AI it feels like the UAE is at the forefront of that global conversation. There's so much advancement that's happening here that can actually be spoken about on a global level. And quantum as the next step, that certainly means, Mohamed, we're going to be inviting you back into the podcast.
Well, you never know.
for the next conversation about this. And my final question, if I may, there's still a lot of misconception when we talk about AI, as well as in the cybersecurity field or on a broad scale. Misconception, misinformation. Would you both say that you're optimists about the future of AI? And what would be your advice to the pessimists out there?
I believe there's always two sides of the story. There's the good side and the not so good side. And we need to take, as good human beings, the positive angle of AI, how we develop it in a controlled manner. It's extremely important we use the controls around AI rather than thinking about the controls as an afterthought. So I'll keep on repeating the same thing, that privacy by design, security by design, availability by design, ethical AI by design, responsible AI by design has to be considered from day one when you're putting together an AI solution to benefit the world, to benefit humanity. And this is extremely important for us to understand.
And that circles back to some of the earlier points you made about responsible AI, so the ethical AI as a future. There's optimism with that nuance. And yourself, Mohamed?
Yeah, I think I'm similar. I'm an optimist. I think that AI has a lot of great things coming for it. It's going to solve some of our most challenging topics and challenges around the world. And I think it's already doing a great job in whether you look at genomics, whether you look at it in the medical and biomedical sphere. So it's actually doing great work. So I think the more we kind of look at the wins, it's a lot more appealing than just to see one or two use cases where it just didn't work. So I'm more of an optimist when it comes to that.
And gentlemen, on that note, this has certainly been very thought-provoking. Thank you so much for your time today. We'll certainly have you back here at the G42 On Air podcast studio for the next chapter in evolution of AI and cybersecurity.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mohamed.
Thank you, Hadi. Thank you, Hadi.
And thank you for joining us. Please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And see you for the next episode of G42 On Air.